Hey there, guys. It is Bible Scribe. Thank you for joining me on this lazy Saturday morning. I have been amassing a mountain of research and notes on the evangelistic movement that has occurred in our country, in America, over the past century or so. And I had planned a video on ecumenism in general in the evangelical church. But that has become so large that what I'm doing now is I'm breaking that down into separate videos on each leader of the movement. And so today I'm going to go through my notes and information on Billy Graham. And he, having been seen as a leader of the Protestant movement, the Protestant church in America and around the world, many people don't understand and don't realize that his message, especially in his later years, turned into one of ecumenism, which means unity with all denominations, all churches, including the Catholic Church, which he, as we'll see, was very involved with. And so what I wanted to do is just in this video go through notes and information on Billy Graham himself. As a brief outline kind of is we're going to go through some notes on based on chronological order of some things that happened throughout his life, and then we're going to talk about his connections to people like Robert Schuller, Norman Vincent Peale. You will, if you watch through the videos I'm going to be doing on ecumenism, you'll start to recognize all of these names. They're interconnected. And then at the end, we're going to go through some information that is what I call the darker side. Some testimony, alleged issues with Billy Graham, things that have been reported but not talked about. So that will be very interesting too. And my goal here is not to destroy a man's reputation, destroy anyone's ideas or beliefs about a man named Billy Graham, but instead to shed light on the information that is out there and available, and that at least is there, so you have a good base of knowledge with which to make your opinions, because without that all you have is the opinions you've gained from possibly watching television or seeing newspapers, and that's a very limited set of information that you're going to get in those places. So let's start out. I'll bring my notes up. So like I said, we're going to start out with kind of a timeline of events, and there will be some interesting points in that, but then we'll go into some other details after that. 1949, and things probably happened more than I have listed here. I didn't do an exhaustive examination of Billy Graham's life, but in 1949 he had a large rally in Los Angeles. It's very famous. You can look this up. I'm going to have links to almost every rally or event that I'm going to talk about in the description or in my blog post. In 1950 was when Graham founded the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, headquartered in Minneapolis, and then it moved to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1999. But it maintains a number of international offices in Hong Kong, Tokyo, Buenos Aires. I didn't do a lot more research. This is just a scrape off of Wikipedia, but just so you had some information here about how big and well-funded, quote unquote, that the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association was. And you would have to ask yourself, did Billy Graham in 1950, at the very beginning of his career, have the means, the financial means, to start these types of things? No, he was given the financial means by others. We will talk about that a little bit further on. And part of this Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, as it went through the years, is it included all these things: the Hour of Decision, a weekly radio program broadcast, mission television, specials broadcast in almost every market in the US and Canada, syndicated newspaper column My Answer, carried by newspapers across the United States. So he had a column in many of the major newspapers across the entire country. Decision magazine, which you could subscribe to, the official publication of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Christianity Today started in 1956 with Carl F. Henry as its first editor. So Christianity Today, another publication, and that was started, remember how early that was 1956. Passageway.org, the website for youth discipleship created by the association, and Worldwide Pictures was his film distribution firm, and it distributed more than 130 films over the course of its existence. So just slammed these things in here from Wikipedia so you can see the scope of what ended up happening with his association over the years. In 1955, he had a large event in Glasgow. 1957, Madison Square Garden. It's another famous one that you will be able to see on YouTube. 1957 also, Graham said this is quote, "Anyone who makes a decision at our meetings is seen later and referred to a local clergyman, Protestant, Catholic, or Jewish." So that's interesting. This is when we're going to start to think about, why would a Protestant send people that come forward in his events, his speeches, to a Catholic or a Jewish clergyman? Because a Jewish clergyman is not going to direct that person to Christ. Jews do not believe that Christ was the Messiah, and nor would a Catholic reinforce that decision in Christ, because Catholics are more focused on the Pope, God himself, or Mary, and that combination is not the same as a Protestant belief system. And so it's interesting that Graham, being a Protestant, would do this. And this is what makes you start to question, what was the point? What was going on? Why did what seemed to be a solid presentation of the gospel, why did it get infused with all these different ideas as time progressed? And this was 1957. This was super early, 1957. So it just makes you question, why would he send people to a Catholic clergyman or a Jewish clergyman? But that's what happened in every rally. And we're going to see further on that he would partner with these other faiths as he would come into a city to do his events, so that they would help, and then he could easily send people to those different clergymen of different faiths. In 1960, he had a large event in Kenya. 1960 also, he did Israel. 1965, Honolulu, Hawaii was a big one. Again, there are going to be links to all these presentations if you want to watch them. 1967, Billy Graham received an honorary degree of Doctor of Humane Letters from the Roman Catholic College, Belmont Abbey, 1967. Roman Catholic College, Belmont Abbey. So it makes you think, the Catholics really venerated, or at least they acted like they really were in lockstep with Billy Graham. And so it just makes you think. 1972, April 1972, Billy Graham received the International Franciscan Award in Minneapolis, given to the Franciscan friars, or by the Franciscan friars, for his contribution to true ecumenism. And again, I mentioned this word up front. This means the unity of different types of churches. And of course, in the case of this award, it was with the Catholic Church. "While I am not worthy to touch the shoelaces of St. Francis," and this is Billy Graham speaking, "yet the same Christ that called Francis in the 13th century also called me to be one of his servants in the 20th century. So Billy Graham says he's not worthy to touch the shoelaces of St. Francis. And so interesting that St. Francis of Assisi believed in salvation by works and blessed and baptized even animals as a part of his ministry. So it makes you wonder why Graham would say something like this. Was he just trying to be nice and say something like this? Or was there's something else underneath that we didn't see or wasn't spoken. Another belief system working. 1973 had a large event in Johannesburg. In 1979, Billy Graham appeared on the Phil Donahue Show. And this, again, is something you can see online on YouTube. And in discussing Pope John Paul II's visit to the U.S., Billy Graham said this: "I think the American people are looking for a leader, a moral, spiritual leader that believes something. And the Pope does. Thank God I've got somebody to quote now with some real authority." So, did Billy Graham feel that Pope John Paul II, had the authority for him to quote? It just makes you wonder, why would he make such a big deal about the Pope? Why would he do this? It just makes you think he had a belief system that was different than what he portrayed in public view. But by his associations and partnerships, he seemed to make it evident. In 1983, the Florida Catholic, which is a newspaper, 600 people were turned over to the Catholic religion as a result of the Orlando Crusade. And this is just one example, but the Orlando Crusade, so he did, out of the people that came forward, 600 of them were sent to the Catholics. So why would a Protestant be sending people to the Catholic Church? And that's in 1983. That's when I was a child, and I was hearing on TV how great Billy Graham was and all the wonderful things he was doing. And I would see the videos of his seminars and then people coming forward. And I thought, man, I am so happy. That's such a great thing for God and Christ. But the problem was 600 of those people in some services, who knows what the percentage was, they were sent to the Catholic Church to not then be fed as the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's not the focus of the Catholic Church. So using a Protestant message to get people and then sending them off to Catholic clergymen to learn about that religion, which is a different religion, in my opinion, than Christianity. It just, you have to question this. You have to analyze it. You have to wonder why. Billy Graham was knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 2001. And if you know a lot about Queen Elizabeth and the sketchiness of her family, the royal family, and everything that's gone on with them, and that makes you also question things. And then there's a lot that goes on, but in 2018, Billy Graham dies at 99 years old. And so didn't have a lot. I mean, there's plenty to report in that time frame, but he was so old at that point, he didn't have much he could do. There was a lot of tributes to Billy Graham. Every year for a long time, they were doing birthdays to Billy Graham, and you could see those online as well. I'll have some links to those in my notes as well. And so let's move on to just some notes. It is interesting to note that Billy Graham, at the time of his death, was worth $25 million. And for an evangelist to amass that kind of a fortune, and I'm not saying that in and of itself that's wrong, but when I look and I think about people that I truly do respect their ministries, and they have had a consistent message over the years, I don't see this kind of bankroll behind them usually. And so, purportedly he did a lot of good things with that money, but it does make you wonder. Now, here's an interesting note. And I mentioned earlier, where did he get his money when he started these crusades? Where did he get his financing to start the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association so early in his career? Well, here's one possibility. William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper tycoon, financed the first 3 years of his crusades. And if you know anything about Hearst, you know how corrupt he was. And so it makes you ask, well, you got to follow the money. Where does that money come from? And then how did that influence Billy Graham's message and the way he built his association when his bankroll was coming from people like William Randolph Hearst? Another interesting person, Jean Dixon, is connected to Billy Graham. After Jean Dixon's secretary came to Christ, she tried to expose Billy Graham's connection to Jean Dixon. So this is her secretary has come forward as a whistleblower and has said a monthly check that was delivered to Jean Dixon's office was picked up every month by Billy Graham's staff. That's interesting. So it sounds almost like money was being laundered through Jean Dixon's foundation and taken and sent to the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Is that not what that sounds like? Money laundering? Lifelong friends with Robert Schuller. Now, this is another man that we are going to learn a lot more about, because I'm going to do a separate video even just on Robert Schuller of the Crystal Cathedral in California. But Graham talked Schuller, he's the one that talked Robert Schuller into starting his television ministry, which was called The Hour of Power. And there's tons of clips of that online, and also will be in the description. But Robert Schuller's work is another very ecumenical message. He brought Catholics into his church all the time to speak. He partnered with the Catholic Church in California. And so it's a connection to a man that was just as ecumenical, if not more so, than Graham. But when you look at Billy Graham's connections, you see this ecumenical slant, this slant towards the unification of all churches globally, starting with the Catholic Church in most cases. All right, so now we're going to look at Billy Graham's connections to the Vatican, direct connections to the Vatican. I haven't even gone over any of these yet, but when Billy Graham was asked about the Pope in one instance, he said that he and I agree on almost everything. Now that in and of itself is not necessary. I might say something similar to that depending on depending on a lot of factors, but it just smells funny. Why would you say that about the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, who for centuries has corrupted Christianity and made a mockery of Christ and brought pagan practices into the church? That man is not a man who I would say I agree with on almost everything. Billy Graham had many, many public endorsements of the Catholic started World Council of Churches. And this, by the way, is connected to the UN very heavily, and the National Council of Churches also. Billy Graham's consistent attendance at the World Council of Church meetings. He went to all the meetings, or many of them, and was a supporter of it. He had supported the Pope and the Catholic Church, obviously, through what we've read already, but just in general, he was open about that support. He got support himself from the National Council of Churches. It was a symbiotic relationship, and the World Council of Churches. And from what I understand, that was probably both monetarily and in support on the ground, boots on the ground for his events and other things. And press, of course. Support that the internationalists and globalists gave him. So from international and globalist elite, he got all sorts of support. And again, this came through newspaper articles, probably financial support, that like the Jean Dixon thing where it was being laundered, and we don't even know how the money got to him. But he was getting propped up the whole time he was in ministry. 1966, Graham said this as a quote, "I find myself closer to Catholics than the radical Protestants. I think the Roman Catholic Church today is going through a second Reformation." Interesting to say that, a second Reformation. But it obviously wasn't a Reformation towards Christ, because we haven't heard the Catholic Church say any more about Christ. We haven't heard the Pope come out and say things focusing people on Christ himself. We've heard actually the opposite from Pope Francis in modern times. In 1966, the Catholic Herald of June 3rd, 1966 said this, that Billy Graham was quoted as being a friend of the Jesuits. A friend of the Jesuits in the United States. And of course, it's a Catholic source, so they didn't feel, like they needed to hide the fact that they felt Billy Graham was a friend of the Jesuit order. That's the Catholics talking. Now, Dr. Rivera, an ex-Jesuit priest, told me, and this is from another source, but he told me that Billy was being used by the Vatican in 1950, as early as 1950, when the word came to all Jesuits in Central and South America, telling them to fill the stadiums with Roman Catholics wherever Billy Graham spoke. Millions were spent to promote Billy Graham as the world's greatest evangelist. Now we know why we all heard that Billy Graham was the world's greatest evangelist. Because the Vatican partnered with him, and then as he did most of his earlier, he did a tour through South America, and did many of these in the years 1950 and following. The Roman Catholics were paid by the Jesuit order to promote Billy Graham and go to all of his events and fill the stadiums so it looked full no matter where he went. But you don't know this, of course, because they were the same people over and over again in every location. When you start to find out these things and dig in, you start to realize this did not smell good at all. Billy Graham caused President Reagan, Ronald Reagan, to set up an ambassador to the Vatican. And what I read about this too was that this was actually illegal. It was illegal. You're not supposed to set up an ambassador between the United States and a non-country. And the Vatican is not a country. So this was illegal in America. But yet he still did it. Billy Graham apparently convinced Reagan to do it regardless. A complete chapter, by the way, of Billy Graham's autobiography is devoted to his viewpoint that Bill and Hillary Clinton are godly people and God-fearing. How does this make you feel? Bill and Hillary Clinton. Are they godly people and God-fearing? Or are they Satanists and Luciferians and sexual deviants? Do they worship Molech, perhaps? Billy Graham's role as a church leader was to lead people towards the Roman Catholic Church. This is just a statement. It's not an actual evidence or anything, but just felt like it was a true statement after all we've looked at. He was leading people towards the Roman Catholic Church and a one-world religion. He wanted ecumenism, unity. Unity was his whole goal, and it was unity through the Roman Catholic Church. Nothing more. And I think after I've studied this, his Protestant message, which sounded great in the beginning, I think that was a tool to excite the Protestant base, which is what most of America was at the time he began in the 1950s. I think the elite, the Roman Catholics, the Pope, were scared of what was happening in America and around the world. There was a lot of movement towards Christianity, towards Protestantism. In fact, all of America was generally Protestant. And so they had to find a way to infiltrate Protestantism and move everyone instead towards ecumenism, unity under a one-world religion, and the Pope wanted that to be Catholicism. And so they employed Billy Graham and others, as we're going to see in my other videos. Now, he has connections to this man named Norman Vincent Peale, and I will likely do another video on Norman Vincent Peale himself alone, but you can do some research if you want on Norman Vincent Peale. He is not a Christian and was a kind of a esoterist. But as noted in Carol George's 1992 biography of Peale, Peale sent Nixon, Richard Nixon, our president, a letter while vacation in Europe in 1960, divulging that recently I spoke for an hour with Billy Graham, who feels as I do, that we must do all within our power to help you. And they're talking about in his presidential race. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that, I'm not sure I have it in this set of notes, but that when JFK was running for election for president, that Billy Graham, along with a lot of the guys we're going to be talking about, united against him, even though he was Catholic. I think it was because of his more Protestant or Christ-centered beliefs, JFK, and his JFK's moving and working against the elite, the power hungry, the globalists of the world. He was not globalist, and so they united against him. Now you have to ask yourself, why would Billy Graham unite against a Catholic? Well, it's because even as a Catholic, JFK's views differed from this set of power controllers. And so they had to unite against him. And Billy Graham joined in that effort. And I think this actually might be, no, this is different. But here it says about Norman Peale. This book that we had mentioned here, his biography, told of a secret meeting of influential allies that revealed through a letter from Peale's wife, Ruth, to a friend that Norman Peale had a conference yesterday at Montreux, Switzerland, with Billy Graham and about 25 church leaders from the United States. She wrote, they were unanimous in feeling that the Protestants in America must be aroused in some way, or the solid bloc Catholic voting plus money will take this election. And I believe this is, I think if I remember correctly, this is the election of JFK they're talking about. But you see how Billy Graham partnered with Catholics to move the vote in America, to sway the votes. And this is why in many videos that I've done, I say things like that we don't have power to choose, or haven't had for a long time, the power to choose our presidents. And there's a reason we were able to choose Donald Trump. That's different. But because things are changing. Thank God, things are changing. Got to keep my pen thing from coming up. I hate that thing. Oh, I got to fix that. Now, Robert Schuller says this. These quotes are about Graham and Norman Vincent Peale as well, but Schuller said this. You knew Fulton Sheen. He's talking to Billy Graham in one of his Hour of Power television shows. You knew these men. Your comments on both of these men, Fulton Sheen and Norman Vincent Peale. Fulton Sheen, by the way, is an archbishop in the Catholic Church. Billy Graham says the primary way of communication is to live life. Let people see that you're living what you proclaim. I lost a very dear friend, and since that time, the whole relationship between me and my work, you and your work, and the Roman Catholic Church has changed. They opened their arms. They opened their arms to welcome us, and we have the support of the Catholic Church. The support of the Catholic Church almost everywhere we go. And I think that we must come to the place where we keep our eyes on Jesus Christ. I mean, at least he says that, but not on what denomination or church or what group we belong to. So he wants you to throw away everything that you believe that's different between you and other denominations, and including the Catholic Church, and just focus on Jesus Christ and join with them all. Does that sound like what Jesus Christ would want us to do, or the writers of the New Testament when they called us to be Bereans and check doctrines and reprove one another? No, he wants us to throw away all those extra doctrines or not worry about them, focus on Christ, and move towards the Catholic Church. Move towards unity globally. And we know that global unity of man is something that God has prevented since the Tower of Babel, right? All right, now I hate to say it, we are going to move to the darker side with Billy Graham. Now, a lot of the stuff that's in this section, the darker side, is allegations. Some of it is actually reported from newspapers, but this is where it gets into the, oh man, did that slip out and they didn't mean for this information to get out? They couldn't control all the information, so some stuff got out. In 1948, there was a luncheon at Conservative Baptist Association in Milwaukee. Billy Graham was asked, Billy, what do you expect of the World Council of Churches to do this August? He says as an answer, I believe they're going to nominate the Antichrist. Very interesting. Very interesting. It's an interesting comment to make. Now, we could assume that at this point, perhaps Billy was not as compromised and not as used by the Catholic Church, and he was stating a statement of truth, perhaps to himself. But perhaps it's also revealing, because he says why would the World Council of Churches nominate anybody? Why would they nominate anybody? That doesn't make any sense. So his statement here is slightly chilling. Slightly chilling. In 1952, in Paris, Billy Graham and another evangelist had dinner with 2 prostitutes, and each one took one of them home. This is from Marshall Frady in the book Billy Graham, A Parable of American Righteousness. And so that is very interesting. Seen with 2 prostitutes, Billy Graham and another evangelist. I'm not sure who this evangelist was. I may have seen that name somewhere. Someone had a speculation on that, but apparently he was seen with prostitutes in France. In 1954, the man who ran security for the Sacramento Crusade, saw a high-priced hooker sneak into Billy Graham's room prior to him going out for the crusade. And, perhaps we give the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps he went in after the crusade or when he saw that woman of ill repute and he just sent her away. Perhaps. Let's hope that's the case. 1969, in Hollywood, Florida, Billy Graham said that he often attends love-ins and rock festivals incognito by putting on a false mustache and beard. And he said that he found this refreshing. This was in the Chicago Daily News of December 29, 1969. And it appears that the purpose of the article is to make Billy Graham look hip to the rock and rollers of that day, the teenagers. Very interesting. Billy Graham described his friendship also with Allen Dulles. He says, I make every effort not to let it appear that I favor one party over the other. I count Secretary Dulles as a friend, but Senator Humphrey is also a good friend of mine. We were both swimming... Why would you say this? We're both swimming nude at the YMCA pool in Minneapolis, where he was running for mayor. And this is Allen Dulles, who was the director of the CIA at the time. So if you're really good friends, and this was more common back in those days than it is today, but the YMCA's allowed nude swimming in the pools, and there were pools for just men where they could do that. But it's interesting that he would mention this relationship with Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA. And we know, if you do any study, the CIA is deeply embedded with the Catholic Church as well. And so all of this just starts to make us smile. We just smile when we see this stuff. It gets a little overwhelming. A complete chapter of Graham's autobiography, again, dedicated to his viewpoint that Bill and Hillary Clinton are godly people and God-fearing. I repeated that from before. Now, there is some evidence we have that Billy Graham was a Freemason. Jim Shaw, who was an ex-33rd degree Freemason, he was the highest ranking Freemason to defect to Christianity at the time. He writes about Billy Graham being at his 33rd degree initiation ceremony. This is in the book Deadly Deception, page 104, by Jim Shaw. So he reports that when he was initiated as a 33rd degree Mason, that Billy Graham was part of the ceremony, that he was there. Albert Gallatin Mackey, in his book, The History of Freemasonry. Now, this is an actual Freemason publication. It's published by Gramercy Books, and it's given to initiates so they understand the Freemasonry. It lists in the inside flap that Billy Graham is among famous Freemasons. And it does this because they're trying to encourage their recruits to gain interest in Freemasonry, so they become committed to the organization. And so they put on there, of course, that Billy Graham, because he was a famous Freemason. And just note that Billy Graham is close friends with Harry Truman and Lyndon Johnson, who were both 33rd degree Masons. So, it's just about friendships and connections and associations. It's not a proof, but it seems here from what we're reading that it was more likely that he was definitely a Freemason, and likely a very high degree, because you don't get to go into the initiation ceremony for a 33rd degree Mason unless you are a 33rd degree Mason. Now we get into some interesting stuff that gets really dark. And again, these are allegations. I'm not claiming these things are true, but where there's smoke, there may be fire. An investigator of the Watergate scandal says that the purpose of Watergate was to steal something called the list from the DNC, the Democratic National Convention headquarters, to prevent a list of pedophilia and blackmail victims from getting into the hands of the public. So he said, this investigator, who was anonymous in the source that I read this from, but he's saying that the reason Watergate occurred was because Nixon was trying to steal this and keep this list of blackmailed politicians, celebrities, public figures from getting into the hands of the public. It was a list, a dirty list, so that they could keep blackmail on people and keep control over them. It was from the Democratic National Headquarters. Interesting. Now, Kathy O'Brien, who has come forward since the 80s, I believe, as a mind control victim. She says that she was used as a sex slave by the elite, by politicians. She was sold into it by her father, who was connected to senators. And she has a book that's well documented. It's called Transformation of America. She says Billy Graham did not follow his own rules, which was to stay away from fornication, but he fornicated with her when she was a presidential prostitute. Now, this is an allegation by Kathy O'Brien. You're welcome to look it up. Kathy has got a lot of seminars she's given on YouTube at different places around the world about her time as a mind-controlled slave. Mind control survivor Kay Sullivan, in his book, MK, says that she was abused and raped by Billy Graham, among others. Another allegation from a sex slave survivor, a mind control survivor, that claims rape. And again, I'm not claiming these are are truths, perhaps, but you have to do the research yourself and find out what you believe. Here is another. This woman, Fiona Barrett, has also come forward in the last few years out of Australia and claimed that she is also a victim of SRA ritual abuse by the elites of the world, and has accused Billy Graham of raping her as a part of one of these rituals, satanic rituals. And on her website, two also anonymous victims had sent in letters, information to her, claiming that they were also abused by Billy Graham, being taken to a Billy Graham crusade as a small child, perhaps 6 or 7, and being made to give him oral sex. And then on the other one, it stated a satanic ritual with Billy Graham when I was 7, hung upside down on a cross with about 10 children in a half circle of men in black robes, like the movie Eyes Wide Shut or Interview with a Vampire. Ritual abuse victim David Schuller also sent in his information to Fiona Barrett's website. He says that he and I were trafficked to Bohemian Grove as children. The Bohemian Grove, where many of the political elites of the world go. There I was dressed as a teddy bear and made to participate in a pedophile hunt amidst the redwood forest, and was drugged and raped by Reverend Billy Graham in a pink bubble-themed cabin. Now, I don't know about you, and I'm not, again, claiming that I know that this is true. These are allegations. But you have to ask yourself, when you get 1, 2, 3, 4 allegations, we saw another 5 and 6 above. How many allegations does it take before you start to believe this narrative? Let's pretend half of these were true. What if only 1 out of the 6 was true? After a while, the statistics on that start to boggle your mind. But that is the end of my information for this video on Billy Graham. Now, this hurts. This honestly hurts to talk about these things. I do think that Billy Graham was funded and supported by the elites, probably headed out of the Vatican by the Pope. And he was used by the elite, the deep state, to push Protestantism away from Christ, away from their foundational beliefs, away from their specific beliefs that made them a denomination, and push Protestantism towards Catholicism, so that they could start pushing all religions around the world towards a unified one world religion. And so he was bankrolled by people like Randolph Hearst, and he was given all the support and money he needed to do all of these things. He had a huge empire. And then when you see how it's possible that he was compromised and blackmailed to stay silent about the elite of the world, but to then push their agenda through his association, through his work, through his events and seminars and traveling all over the world, and his partnerships with the World Council of Churches and the Catholic Church, you start to understand the picture here. And if you're like me and you grew up with your parents looking at Billy Graham presentations on television and saying how wonderful that was, and all the things that you thought you knew, but then when truth starts coming out, you start to understand a different picture. And if this hurts like it did for me, if this hurts you, I apologize for that. Sometimes the truth hurts. Stay safe.